The New York Giants' 2025 success hinges on this one unit that's still a bit of a question mark. Locked On Giants starts right now.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, credentialed member of the New York Giants media for Locked On, as well as for New York Giants on SI, which is where you can find all of my written work. And as always, we welcome on in our Blue Crew community members, our everydayers, our newcomers, and everybody in between. And we thank you so much for spending part of your day with us here on the Locked On Giants podcast. And if you've made us your first listen of the day, we appreciate that as well. And today's episode of Locked On Giants is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the promo code Locked On NFL to get $20 off your first purchase. All right, Giant fans, on today's show, there is a lot going on with the New York Giants that looks very, very promising for 2025. That being said, there's one thing in particular that I'm going to talk about that's a little bit of a concern. It's a hidden worry. A lot of you might know what it is once I get into it, but this is a little bit of a concern, and I'm going to break it down for you in segment one. Then when we get to segment two, I'm going to look at some of the bottom of the roster battles. Who's in the lead? How do I think it's going to play out? Now, these are battles that are probably too close to call. They will be determined by the final preseason game, which is coming up on Thursday. But I'm going to give you my take based on what we've seen so far in the games as well as in the practices. So basically, who's ahead for roster spots. And then finally, in segment three, a couple of cap-related issues. I know a lot of you always ask me about the cap. A lot of you ask me, where's the money going to come from? So I'm going to talk about that in segment three and kind of break some of that down for you as well. So again, welcome on into everybody. Let's get into it. All right. So what is the hidden concern, the one worry that could potentially hurt this Giants team? And no, I'm not talking about injuries. No, I'm not talking about the offensive line. No, I'm not talking about the quarterback play, Russell Wilson or Jameis Winston or whichever quarterback you want to put in there. I am talking about the Giants' run defense. The run defense is still very much a concern. Now, let me give you some numbers from Pro Football Focus, and then we'll kind of break down what's kind of been happening with the run defense in the two preseason games that we've seen so far. All right. The Giants have 22 stops. A stop is defined as, a play that doesn't gain a lot of positive yards. So that's ranked 26 in the NFL after two preseason games. Their tackles for a loss and no gain plays, 9. They've got 9 of that. That is tied for 13th in the NFL. This is a big one. The average depth of tackle for the run defense, 4.15 yards, which is the 13th highest in the NFL. So opposing offenses are rushing for at least 4 yards, 4.1 yards against the Giants' run defense. Not good, okay? 68.8% of the Giants' run defense plays receive negative grades from Pro Football Focus. They are tied for 8th in missed tackles with 11. All right. These are all not very promising numbers. All right. So, this was supposed to be a unit that was upgraded. The Giants put a lot of resources towards the unit in the offseason. It is still not upgraded. And you might say, okay, well, Dexter Lawrence hasn't played. And you wouldn't be wrong. Dexter Lawrence is a big part of it. But this team also has to have guys that can step up when Dexter Lawrence is not in there for whatever the reason, whether it be for a rest, whether it be, heaven forbid, because he can't play, whatever the reason, the team can't keep falling apart when Dexter Lawrence is not in there. All right. So what has been going on with the run defense, you ask? Couple of things, really. The three tech and the zero techs that have played, right? The three techs are usually, on the end. The zero techs would be the nose tackles. They're getting pushed backwards into the linebackers. And that's creating kind of like a domino effect in which the linebackers now have to wade through the quote unquote trash that is up front, wading through all the muddiness, if you will, to get to the ball carriers. And by the time they get there, ball carriers into the second level, possibly the third level. We saw a lot of that with the Jets. The Jets had three big runs, including one on a third down play. I think it was 3rd and 8. And the linebackers just couldn't get to it because they were being, the defensive linemen were getting pushed backwards and just pushed out of the way like, they were rag dolls. So that's certainly one thing. Uh, Speaking of the linebackers, the run defense by the linebackers hasn't really been sharp. All right. You see, in particular, the inside linebackers are running around the blocks versus through blocks. So when you have to run around the guy that is trying to block you, now you're going a little out of your way. So if you're going out of your way, let's say you're going to the right and the running back is coming towards your left, and the guy who's blocking you is keeping you from getting to the left. Now that extra split second or two is creating an opportunity for the running back to get into the second level and beyond. So that's been some of the problem. Okay. Another problem has been missed tackles, as I mentioned before. Guys are taking bad angles and just flat out missing guys. And, this is one of the things, Brian Dable, for all the changes he's made this summer to improve the team, and he's made a lot, stuff that I've been calling for. The one thing he hasn't done is he doesn't have his guys tackled to the ground. That needs to be rethought moving forward. Training camp is just about over, but moving forward, if Brian Dable is still here next year, and I have no reason to think he won't be, he's got to reconsider that. Not saying you tackle to the ground every single opportunity, but you got to practice that. We saw sloppiness in the missed tackles in both preseason games. It was a little bit better against the Jets, but still a problem. And, tackling is one of the basic skills of football. There has to be ways that they can incorporate more drills. Now, from what I can see, they work against the sleds. They used to work against the donut. I don't know if you guys remember, but when Steve Spagnuolo was here, he used to have this big donut. And the idea was to teach guys how to properly tackle with the shoulder. But see, here's the problem. You want to be able to correctly tackle a moving target because, as you know, if a guy is coming at you and you're going in with your shoulder and the guy moves and now all of a sudden he becomes straight contact with your helmet, that can be a penalty. So that's just something, that's a big, issue that I don't think Brian Dable has really addressed. I understand why he hasn't. I think he's concerned about injuries and keeping guys healthy. But there has to be a way, a balance, if you will, in future training camps to teach tackling. Let these guys get used to it. It's not like riding a bike where you don't do it for a while and then you remember once you start doing it. There are too many guys taking bad angles, missing tackles, and as a result, there are plays being made that really shouldn't be made. So bottom line, folks, the run defense still a problem. And I'll leave you with this before we switch over to the next segment. The Giants put a lot into upgrading the pass rush, but the guys on the pass rush say we've got to earn the right to rush the passer. And Micah McFadden, who was one of the guys who spoke to the media on Monday, I asked him about, what's easier, the run defense or the pass rush. And Micah basically said that with the run defense, it's all 11 doing their jobs, whereas with the pass defense, one guy can win and the play becomes a success. So it's more of a concerted effort with run defense than it is with the pass. And the Giants just not very good, not very consistent when it comes to the run defense. And that's something that has to get cleaned up. They're running out of time, is the bottom line. So we'll see if they can clean it up. But yeah, next year when we get to training camp again, That's going to be one of the things I'm going to be calling for Brian Dable. If he is still the head coach, which again, I think he will be, that's going to be one of the things I'm going to be calling for him to do differently in training camp. All right, Giant fans, coming up next, we're going to take a look at some of the bottom of the depth chart battles. Who do I think is ahead? Who still has something to prove? We'll talk about that right after this. Hey, Giant fans, August 26th is officially FanDuel Futures Day, a brand new holiday for football fans who live for bold predictions and preseason hunches. For just 24 hours, FanDuel is giving you deals on NFL season predictions. So whether you're calling your MVP, eyeing a long shot division winner, or ready to crown your Super Bowl champion before week one even kicks off, this is your moment. So go on, take a flyer on the Defensive Rookie of the Year honors if you're feeling good about Giants outside linebacker Abdul Carter running away with it. Visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your futures bets now because Futures Day is one day and one day only. FanDuel, play your game. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to Locked On Giants. I'm your host, Patricia Traina. Coming up this week, the Giants play the New England Patriots on Thursday night. It is the preseason finale. I will, of course, have a show for you, probably have it Friday morning. I will try to get it done on Thursday night, but the night games, they tend to run a little late, obviously, and only so much I can do before I just start to fade out. But anyway, I will try to have a show for you as quickly as possible. We'll take a look at roster projections. I know a lot of you have said, okay, when's your 53-man roster projection coming out? That is coming this week as well. Might even do it before the game. So just stay tuned. Lots still coming up here on the Locked On Giants podcast. All right. In this segment, let's talk about some guys, speaking of the roster, who are fighting for roster spots and who's in the lead. So I'm going to look at some of the bottom of the depth chart type of deals here. And I want to start off with offensive line. Now, a guy that at the start of camp, if you had said to me, this guy has a chance of making the roster, and I would have said no. This is a guy who, quite honestly, in preseason, he's had a pretty good summer and a pretty good preseason. And that is offensive lineman Joshua Ezeudu. Now, Joshua Ezeudu, I still don't think is a fit for offensive tackles, especially left tackle. But when he has played guard, which is the position he should have been playing all along, he's actually looked pretty good. And dare I say, Joshua Ezeudu has looked a little bit better than Jay Kubas, a guy that I thought at the start of training camp would have an inside edge for one of the interior offensive line positions. Now, I'm not saying at this point that Ezeudu is going to beat out Aaron Stinney. I think Aaron Stinney might have a little bit of an edge there, but Joshua Ezeudu has really looked much, much better this summer, probably as good as I've seen him look in training camp. So that's a battle that still needs to be decided. But right now, I would say Ezeudu over Jay Kubas. All right, tight end. Let's talk about tight end. At the end of the spring, my projected tight ends would have been Daniel Bellinger, Theo Johnson, and Chris Manhertz. Guess what, folks? I'm starting to wonder if Greg Dulcich doesn't steal a spot. Now, do I think the Giants will go with 3 tight ends? Yes. So you're probably saying, well, what about Thomas Fidone? Where's he going to fit in? Here's the thing with Thomas Fidone. I do not think that if the Giants waive him, he will make it to the practice squad. Do I think the Giants might keep 4 tight ends? I think that's a lot, but it also could depend on injuries, right? Knock on wood, and I know I'm going to hear from some of you saying, yeah, jinx the Giants, but knock on wood, the Giants haven't been totally hit hard by injuries. They have some concerns. Andrew Thomas still has to get out there. Malik Neighbors, who reportedly is dealing with a back issue, not the toe, as we all thought, he needs to get out there. But they might be in a position to where they can keep an extra guy until they can kind of figure out, how they want to do things. So can I see them keeping 4 tight ends? Possibly. I don't think it's practical, but Dulcich has kind of looked good. Now, I think what will happen there is they'll try and slide Dulcich onto the practice squad and keep Fedoni, assuming that there are no injuries at that spot. But what I'm getting at is I don't think Chris Manhertz is necessarily a lock like I once did, especially if you consider Manhertz did a lot of the fullback snaps when they played fullback, and they're training Elijah Chapman to play fullback. So Manhertz to me is not a lock anymore, to where Dulcich might make it, maybe if they keep four. If not, it'll be Fedoni, and I think they'll try and put Dulcich on the practice squad. Okay, running back, Dante Miller makes this team. No question about it. The kid has done really well on offense, especially as a pass receiver out of the backfield. Special teams he's done well with. Cam Scatterbo, had he been healthy, I think Cam Scatterbo would have been Dante Miller's biggest obstacle. But Cam Scatterbo, folks, he's going to IR. All right, he's going to be one of two guys that the Giants put on IR at the 53-man roster cutdown date, and Scatterbo is going to be designated for return. There is that new rule that allows for up to two guys to be designated for return if they land on IR during the 53-man cutdown date. Right? In the past, if you landed on IR at cutdown date, you were done for the season. Scatterbo is going to take one of those spots. All right. So Miller, in my mind, makes this roster. All right. Outside linebacker. This is interesting. I went with initially I went with 3 when I was making up my preliminary draft. I'm giving you a little hint here into what I'm thinking here, but I could see a situation where maybe the Giants keep 4 outside linebackers, even though, you can count Chauncey Golston as kind of an outside guy. Although I personally think Chauncey Golston is more of a 3-point stance type of guy. I think Trace Ford potentially edges Tamon Fox off the roster. Now, if they only go with the 3, Thibodeau, Burns, and Abdul Carter, I could see Ford potentially going to the practice squad. I think they've got something to work with there with that young man. I think Tamon Fox, I think his time is up here. All right. At cornerback, a guy who I think is going to make it because of his versatility. He can play the slot. He can play outside. He has also played on special teams and done a good job. Art Green is going to make it, in my opinion. Right? He's looked really good, and I can see him getting a spot at the bottom of that depth chart. And remember, there's been some injuries at cornerback, particularly at the bottom of the depth chart. Now, a couple of the guys that were injured came back, like Corey Black, Trey Hawkins. Cordell Flott is still was dealing with something. He came back. Deontay Banks missed the last game. He was dealing with something. I think Art Green will find a spot on this roster. Last but not least, let's talk about defensive line and the question of who do they keep? Or not who do they keep, but who starts? Roy Robertson Harris or Rakeem Nunez Roches? It's going to be Roy Robertson Harris. I think he is past Nacho on the depth chart. Now, do I think the Giants will cut Nacho? I've been saying that all along, but that being said, I'm starting to think they will carry him, which I don't know if I agree with that, but I could see the logic in carrying him. Nacho is a good leader. He's a good locker room guy. He's not a horrible player. I mean, granted, he hasn't looked great this summer, but, they like him. So I wonder if Nacho doesn't survive. And if so, who's he going to push off the roster? I think DJ Davidson could be pushed off the roster. Maybe DJ Davidson goes to the practice squad. I think Jordan Riley is probably not going to make this team. So yeah, that's a move that I'm curious to see how that plays out. But right now, I would say Roy Robertson Harris probably has beaten out Nacho to start on the defensive line. All right, coming up next, we're going to take a look at a couple of cap issues, some things that the Giants need to do that I think they will do in order to clear some salary cap space. That's coming up right after this. Hey, Giant fans, we have all been there, logging on early and waiting forever for concert tickets to go on sale, only to lose your spot for a show that you've been dying to see. Live music should be all about making memories, not dealing with the stress of ticket shopping. And that's where Game Time comes in. Game Time makes getting concert tickets faster and easier than ever. Prices actually drop as it gets closer to showtime, and you can save up to 60% off with their killer last minute deals. Ever wonder what your view will look like before you buy? The app shows you a panoramic seat view so that there are zero surprises. With Game Time, the price you see is the price you pay. There are no hidden fees. And if you're worried about what happens if your plans change, worry no more. The Game Time guarantee has your back with cancellation protection and more. So go on, take the guesswork out of buying concert and show tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL to get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the promo code LOCKEDONNFL to get $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to Locked On Giants. I'm your host, Patricia Traina. And in this segment, we're going to talk salary cap. I know a lot of you always ask about the salary cap. Giants haven't done anything really. The cap number is still, I think, the second lowest amount in the NFL. It's just slightly over 3 million. But there are a couple things they can do, and I think they will do in order to clear some space before they actually have to go and restructure contracts. Now, the first thing I do want to say is, the Giants have already cleared out some cap space, which they have since used up. So a lot of people are like, okay, so are they going to go and touch Andrew Thomas's contract to get some cap space? Folks, if I'm Joe Schoen, I would not touch that contract. 2 years in a row, he has missed time. I wouldn't keep pushing money on his contract to down the road, not knowing if he's going to make it through or still have problems. So Andrew Thomas's contract, right off the bat, I'm going to tell you, I would not touch it at all. All right, I'd be nervous to do that. So where can the Giants potentially get some money? I'll give you two spots. I mentioned the first one in the last segment, the end of the last segment. Rakeem Nunez-Roches. Roches has a $5.033 million cap hit this year. He's in the final year of his contract. $3.565 million is his base salary. If I'm Joe Schoen, I go to him and I say, Nacho, we love you. You're awesome, but we need some money back, especially if, as I predict, Roy Robertson Harris is going to end up being the starter ahead of Nacho on the defensive line next to Dexter Lawrence, right? And basically, this becomes a situation where if a guy is approached for a pay cut and he refuses, you cut him. It's that simple. It's not like the Giants don't have depth. It's not like, they won't have an opportunity to pick up guys to replace guys. That's kind of where you're at. And the Giants have a lot of defensive line depth who can potentially, step in if Nacho says, no, I'm not taking a pay cut. All right. The other guy who I think will be asked to take a pay cut is tight end Daniel Bellinger. Bellinger has a $3.604 million cap hit. His base salary is $3.406 million, and that is because of the performance escalator. So much like what the Giants did, I think it was a few years ago with Darius Slayton, when Slayton hit the performance escalators and they basically went to Slayton, they said, take a pay cut or we will cut you. I think the Giants will do the same thing with Daniel Bellinger. All right. Now, again, if Bellinger says, nope, not taking a pay cut, remember how I talked about, Dulcich? Now maybe you get him onto the roster. So now maybe your tight ends become Theo Johnson, Dulcich, and Fedoni if Manhurts doesn't make it. That wouldn't necessarily be a bad group, right? But Bellinger, we have to see, how he would respond to that. Look, nobody wants to have to take a pay cut. It's kind of insulting to some guys, as a matter of pride. I don't know how Nacho would respond. I don't know how Bellinger would respond, but it's a necessity. Unfortunately, it's business. It's nothing personal. Bellinger. He's not a horrible tight end. When you throw him the ball, he catches it. But it's clear to me that the Giants have been trying to replace him as a TE1, which he is not. After that first year, we thought maybe he would be TE1. They tried to replace him with Darren Waller. That didn't work. as we all know. They brought in, obviously, Theo Johnson last year. That seems to be going in the right direction. So when you're TE2, when you're the highest paid tight end, probably you've got the old bullseye on your back as far as management coming to you and asking you to take a pay cut. So that's kind of what I see happening with Daniel Bellinger. So those are the two guys that I think are going to be approached and where the Giants can get money. Because look, if you're Joe Shane, you don't want to kick the can down the road with going to, like I said, Andrew Thomas, who I would not touch his contract. Dexter Lawrence just got a raise, so I don't think he's going to be touched. Brian Burns, if I remember correctly, I think his contract was adjusted. Do they maybe go to Bobby Okereke and adjust his contract? I think they could, but I don't think, that they're in a position to where if Okereke says no, that they have a lot of depth at that position to kind of make up for, or to feel comfortable, I should say, with cutting him. So I don't think they go to Okereke. So we'll see how it works out. But the Giants are going to need more cap space in order to get through the year. Figure about $10 million in space should get them through the year as far as taking care of practice squad elevations, emergency signings for injuries, and all that's good stuff. All right, Giant fans, that's going to do it for this edition of the Locked On Giants podcast. As always, we thank you for tuning in. And if you made us your first listen of the day, we appreciate that. Now, for your next listen, don't forget, NFL fantasy draft season is here. So check out our Locked On Fantasy Football podcast with hosts Vinny Iyer and Michelle Majuk. Listen every day to prep your fantasy draft and become the most informed manager so that you can take home your league's trophy this season. Find Locked On Fantasy Football on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcasts. All right, Giant fans, I will see you tomorrow. Until then, have a good one.